One of the reasons I went to seminary was to learn how to preach. Problem is, the more classes I took, the worse I got. I think the worst invention in the world is the video camera. It's hard enough to listen to yourself on audio, but then to actually see the weird mannerisms you make is even harder. And so we'd have to go to the chapel and preach to the 6 students that were there, plus the professor. And then afterwards, you would have to go and watch it. Well, the next day I was scheduled to go in and watch my videotape. And I literally prayed to God that I would be sick. It's the only time I've ever prayed for sickness. Most of the time I pray for healing, but in this case I was praying for sickness, and I was so disappointed that God did not answer my prayer. And so I moped my way into that lab, and there was a new instructor there that day. And we watched the sermon, and I noticed that all he said was positive comments. And so he'd say, that was a nice gesture. Strong phrase. Sometimes there were very long pauses between his comments, but nevertheless everything he said was only positive. And afterwards he says, Bob, let me tell you what your 3 strengths in preaching are. And then he enumerated them. And then he said, Bob, you don't get better by trying to focus on your weaknesses. You get better by trying to accentuate your strengths. If you'll do that, then your weaknesses will tend to take care of themselves. So here are your 3 strengths. That was worth the entire price of seminary. And I learned this principle, that affirmation is the foundation of change. And I found that to be so helpful in working with people. Later on, as I was planting a church, we had a young high school student that joined the worship team. He'd come from a very hard family background. And as I watched him up there with the others, he looked like he'd been baptized in vinegar, or he was trying to pass a kidney stone or something. I mean, he had this awful face as he was looking down, trying to concentrate on his stuff. And it really bothered me because I said, man, this doesn't make me want to worship at all. And so for 3 weeks I stewed over it, wondering what to do, because I knew that a negative word would crush this young man. And so one day, as I saw him in worship, I just noticed just once he looked up and smiled briefly before he went back to his other position. And I said, that's my opportunity. So between the services I went to him and I said, Randy, do you know what you did? And he, what did I do wrong? I said, nothing you did wrong, it's what you did right. I said, you smiled. And you know what that made me want to do? That made me want to worship God all the more. Great job. And then I walked out of the room. The next service, you should have seen him. It looked very mechanical and very funny, but the worship team picked up on that, started affirming him, and he transformed into one of the most wonderful worship leaders you'd ever know. And he became a church planter and has planted 2 churches personally and is continuing on that particular journey. Affirmation is the foundation of change.